Hello, my name is Franz Spohn, and I am going to introduce you to one of Faber-Castell's Try It box. And this particular box is the Monochrome box. Okay, the front of the box there. First thing you'll see is there's a really nice little kind of newsletter that talks about Faber-Castell and their involvement with green issues and reforesting and setting up parts of their forests for preserving wildlife. And they're very good about being green and being community responsible. So I think you'll find that this is very enjoyable and informative to read about that. And we will reveal pull the curtain back, and there's what we've got. All right, we have a variety of materials in this box, but they're all more or less kind of monochromatic, which means that, you have a basic color, basic tone, rather than having a full spectrum of things that goes from red to orange, yellow, green, blue, rainbow colors. So the monochromes are interesting to work with. They're more about what we call value, or the lightness or the darkness of the tone and materials. And so when you think about it, you have from white to black and all the shades in between. Or if you're using like a sepia color, you have dark sepia, light, white, and things like that. But we'll be getting into that. So we've got graphite pencils. We have color pencils, we have a sharpener, kneaded eraser, a nice eraser pencil type of thing, a paper stomp or a blender, and we've got a series of soft pastels in different tones. So let's see what these things can do. You want to make sure that you get a good quality drawing paper. Now this is a all media paper because we've got a couple of projects that I want to show you where we're going to mix media a little bit, so it'll be good for everything else. But so you want to get a paper that is made specifically for drawing, for art projects, and don't rely on going to the office copier or something like that and grabbing some paper, because that paper is not suitable for taking the full advantage of what you can do with these pencils. All right, the first material in your box that I'd like to explore are graphite pencils. And in this particular selection, you have HB, 2B, 4B, and 6B. All right, and that determines, or that's a signification of how soft, to what degree of darkness you'll get with each pencil. So the Goldfaber graphite comes in 12 degrees of softness, or actually goes from hard to soft. And the letters B indicates the pencils that are soft, and obviously the letter H stands for hard. So if you have a 6H pencil, that's a very hard pencil, and you would use that for maybe doing sketching for something that's a little bit more mechanical or a little more exact, or you might use that with a ruler. And the B's, if you get a 6B or an 8B, actually, it goes all the way up to an 8B, that's the softest of the leads. And what determines whether the lead in a pencil is hard or soft, or the degree to which it is, depends on a mixture of clay and graphite. So when they make the pencils, they make a mixture of a high quality clay with a high quality ground graphite. Now the more the proportion favors the clay, the harder the pencil. So the 6H has a higher ratio of clay to graphite than the 8B, which is the softer pencil, that has a higher proportion of graphite to the clay. So everything in between is on the mixture, the ratio of that clay to graphite. So the one pencil that is in the kit, which is the hardest, is an HB, so it's right in the middle. It has about the same amount of graphite as there is to clay. Now the other thing that I wanted to point out about these pencils, first, they're made from wood in reforested areas of Brazil, so that for every tree that they cut down, there are lots of trees that get planted to replace it in making the pencils. And then the other thing, when they do make the pencils, essentially what happens is that the pencils are mixed according to whatever softness they're going to be into kind of like a slurry or kind of a paste. Then they're extruded so that they have these cylinders of graphite clay mixture, and they're baked. And then once those leads are done, then they're put in slats of wood that have grooves for the lead to settle in. And then when you have like a sandwich of graphite lead to the wood, it's glued together, and then they're formed into the pencil. So there are a whole bunch of them that are kind of laid out, and then they divide those up with a router or a milling machine. Now, the SV bonding that is involved in gluing the lead into the wooden casing is a very extraordinarily helpful thing to do. So with the Faber-Castell pencils, whether it's color pencils, graphite pencils, whatever, they have glue that goes along the entire barrel. So when they're gluing the lead into the wooden blanks, they glue along the whole edge. Most pencils are spot glued, so they only have a spot of glue here and here and here and here, so that if you accidentally drop your pencil or something, that will block the graphite, that'll break the graphite. Then when you go to sharpen the pencil, this lead's just going to come out because there's nothing holding it there. It's been broken, detached from the whole lead, and up until the next glue spot, that thing will just be spinning around in the wood. So you go to sharpen it and the lead falls out. You sharpen it, the lead falls out, and it finally stays in, and that's when you've hit the next glue spot. So the glue process, the SV bonding system that Faber-Castell has, it firmly holds the lead in the entire barrel. So if you do have a break in the lead, you're not going to notice it when you sharpen it. Okay, so what I want to do is just kind of give you an indication of what these pencils will do. And when I hold a graphite pencil or any kind of a drawing pencil, I don't want to hold it like I'm writing somebody a letter, because that encourages you to kind of put the pressure and the same pressure when you're writing. And unless you actually are writing on your drawing or something, or that's part of what you're incorporating it, what it'll do is that usually there's enough pressure in writing that it's going to put an indentation into your paper, and so if you have to erase it, you might get rid of most of the graphite, but if you draw on top of it, then the ghost of that is going to show up. All right, so hold the pencil more at the end, or you might hold it a little like this. I mean, you either all the way at the end, a little bit closer, but what this enables you to do, I usually kind of get it settled between those two fingers, have my thumb on top of it, and then I can just, it just swings freely. And this is just the weight of the pencil. I'm not really putting any pressure on. I'm just going back and forth, and so the graphite is being deposited onto the paper. Now if I want to make it darker, I will press down on it. And so this is about as dark as I can get an HB pencil. And again, it's because of the mix between the clay and the graphite determines whether or not it is going to be really dark or it's going to be lighter looking. Okay, so that's kind of a range going to practically nothing. And when we're working with monochrome materials, we're dealing with value. Now value is not, so much like, oh, that's a good value, which these are, but, or, oh yeah, that's very valuable. In this case, we're talking about the tonality. And so if you think of a grayscale, let's say, where 0 represents white, and let's say 10 represents black, then you can imagine 10 different values or 10 different shades of gray or tonality that go from highlight, which is the white of your paper, to the darkest value or the darkest quality you can possibly build up with your pencils. And that usually would require a 6B in this kit, or ultimately 8B is about the softest lead they make in a standard graphite pencil. All right, so this is our HB, and we'll kind of do a little label there as HB. Now let's look to see what happens with the 2B. There, I don't have to use as much pressure to get a darker value. Okay, so we got the HB, this is the 2B, or not 2B. Now this is the not 2B pencil. It's a 4B. Again, right from the beginning, without having to put any pressure at all, it's pretty dark. Okay, and then the 6B, and that is the softest of the group. So right from the very beginning, that's hardly any pressure, and it's nice and dark. Okay, now the next thing I want to look at are the colored pencils, and in your set you get 3 of them. And they're kind of selected as the more of like a tone, more of kind of like a sepia color, maybe an umber color, and kind of a grayish color. You can do quite a bit with just this range, especially on white paper. A lot of times there are things called chiaroscuro drawings where you use a tone paper, like a light tan, a light gray. Then you'll have like a light pencil you can use for the highlights. So instead of depending on the paper being your white highlight, you actually have a white pencil. And then you have the tone of the paper as your mid-tone, and then you'll have another darker brown in order to complete the triad of highlight and mid-tone and shadow, where the paper is your mid-tone. But these are like very traditional kind of colors for that type of thing, and so let's actually look at how we might be able to do something similar with these pencils as opposed to the graphite in order to do kind of a similar, maybe spherical shape. These pencils are also very similar. Well, all the pencils that Faber-Castell makes have the SV bonding, or the leads are glued across the barrel in all the pencils that Faber-Castell makes. And these come in 40. The gold Faber colored pencils come in a total of 48 colors. So, these are selected to be more monochromatic, but they also have the full range of yellow and the rainbow colors and lots of colors in between. All right, so on this one, maybe I'm going to kind of start off with the gray pencil as, just basically kind of getting things started. All right, and again, I'll hold the pencil very lightly. Now let's be consistent and have the light come from that direction. So, this is going to be the darker side over here. All right, so there's kind of our lighter beginning. Then I'm going to go to this number 187. And so then I'm going to go back and start getting it to kind of work with where that grayish color was. Okay, at this point, again, you might point out use of your eraser here. And kind of roll it so that it would be more kind of a circular. And then I'm just going to very lightly remove some of that. I feel like I got a little bit dark there. And I'm just, a little bit of pressure, and then where I really want it to be white, press down a little bit harder. That might have been a little too extreme, so let's get the gray pencil back. And again, if you apply the pigment easily, very lightly with very little pressure, There are a lot of things that you can do to kind of alter it, and you know, if you want to, you can take your harder eraser and you can just draw right through there, and you would never know that that used to have something in it, except you can kind of obviously see that it has been erased. Okay, so then I am going to take my darker tone, and this is the one that I'm going to use to kind of deal with more of the shadowy area. And the other thing I like doing is using light enough pressure so I am covering the area. I'm giving the illusion that this thing is being shaded, but I really like keeping kind of a little bit of the texture of the paper. So essentially by applying the pigment very lightly on the paper, I'm just putting on the very top part of the texture of the paper, and then there's the valleys, let's say, of the paper that don't get any pigment at all because I'm not using enough pressure to force the pencil down below the top surface of the paper. And I really like that look, and I like taking advantage of kind of a slightly, it gives it a little bit of a glow, a little bit of an iridescence to have that happen. Okay, now we can look at the pastels. So we have kind of in the set, you know, we've got, these are all kind of more of a reddish, warm looking arrangement, and these are a little bit cooler. With these pastels, you have the opportunity of using the corner, you can get a line. All right, if you flip it and go against the edge of the end, then you get a thicker line that's essentially a shape, and then you can use the side of the crayon, the length. Actually, let's flip this over and let's do just a real simple cube. And so what I'm going to do is kind of take my pastel, I go very lightly kind of sketch in kind of a standard cube. Do it slightly in perspective here, I guess. Okay. All right, so again, let's have the light kind of coming in this direction. And so the front in through here on the top would probably be about the lightest. So I'm going to kind of just very lightly treat the surface this way. And then get it just a little bit darker near the edge. Again, you know, kind of as it goes away from the light, it's going to get darker. Now, on this side, you're going to get a little bit of light, especially in the front, so I'm going to use this here. And if I want things to be a little bit more precise, I can take a scrap piece of paper and put it down here, and then either with this eraser or the kneaded eraser, I can use this to block off the paper except for when I want to erase it, and then that becomes a very crisp edge. So, you know, it's just like a little trick you can kind of keep in mind. But once I have that in there, then I'm going to come back with my darker gray. And then I'm going to overlap it with this gray so it kind of blends it together a little bit. And I can also kind of come across this way. There we go. And again, you know, if I've gotten a little sloppy, then I can take my media eraser and kind of clean that up. Okay, so that looks a little sharper. And by the same token, you know, I can come over here and do the same thing. Okay, and then for the back, I take this and I gotta bring it down I'm still interested in kind of keeping some of the texture, for right now at least, and we'll see what happens later. Okay, and I'll take the black, which is even a darker tone, and I can make that even darker. So I've got kind of three basic tones. I've got the light at the top, and I got a darker gray, and I've got the black. Okay, so I'll get that filled out. Okay, so I've got three tones using three drawing materials. Okay, so then the shadow is gonna, let's see, how do I want to do the shadow here? All right, so we're gonna kind of come across here, over like that, like that a bit, and then we'll kind of start with lighter shadow for part of it. And as it comes to the back, it's going to be a lot darker. And the back is going to be a lot darker. Now I can take the blender now. If I want to make things a little more gradual, if I want to kind of get things to go from light to darker a little more gradually rather than have it be so obvious. Okay, so the next thing to consider are charcoal pencils. All right, and so these are Pitt charcoal pencils. They come in three grades of hardness. It goes from, you know, kind of a harder one to soft. They aren't quite as varied as the graphite pencils, but, you know, it's kind of nice to have a hard one that you could use to sketch with. And then the other one that I have is a medium, and then you also have a soft one, I believe. All right, now it's a little tricky with sharpening these. You could try to sharpen in a pencil, but I have found that more often than not, by the time you're getting a point on it, then it's going to kind of shatter, it's going to kind of fall out here. So the classic way of doing it is to use a knife. All right, you could use a pocket knife. This is a knife that Faber-Castell makes that is specifically for carving out the pencils. And so, you know, if you want to keep track of what kind of pencil this is, note that the marking, which is M for medium, is on this end. So I don't want to put my point there because then I might forget, oh, which pencil is that? So I will start at this end to sharpen it so that I maintain the signature of what length this is. And so it's just kind of like, you want to be careful that you're not cutting into yourself, and just be patient with it. It takes a little bit. But I kind of hold it in place, then use my thumb to kind of get it to start shaving. I go all the way around. I generally do this over a trash can, but that would be a little bit hard to try to show on video, so I'm just collecting it on my paper here. Okay, so as I come down, I have a tendency then to bring it up a little bit to kind of get that. And once you get it sharpened, then it's easier to keep it sharpened because this is like kind of the main first time that it's been formed this way, and then it's a lot easier to maintain than just the first time that you have to sharpen. So at this point, I want to be a little more careful. I want to take smaller bits off because I've got the charcoal pretty well unsupported on all sides. So I don't want to use so much force that it's going to break it, and then I got to start carving again. Okay, so now I just am very gentle, taking things off a little bit at a time. Now when I get it to this point, I take a piece of sandpaper, and you can buy little pads that are already made up for this. So you can just take a plain piece of sandpaper, medium, and if you start acting like, all right, I have it there, and then I rotate it, and this will start to kind of smooth it out. And I'll hold it a little bit at an angle, so then that way it gets to be more pointy. Okay, so all right, well, I've got the hard and I've got the medium. I'll use the hard to kind of draw with the main thing here. Now, being able to produce a line with this, it's the same thing that we had mentioned with the graphite, is that, some of the advantage of having a pencil, charcoal pencil, is that you can use nice fluid strokes, build up textures. Incorporate that, I can see how it reacts to being on top of the gray pastel, so there are a lot of possibilities that you can do with that as well. So anyhow, I've got it kind of worked out there, and then I can take this and just kind of do the same thing. Now with this being a little bit softer, it really doesn't take very much to be able to get that laid in right away. Again, kind of go in the arcs. A little bit. Maybe at this point I'll go to my harder pencils so that I can get a lighter value. Okay, if you feel like it, you can take your blending stick. Eraser, if I feel like I got too dark. I want there to be nice highlight, and I can kind of feather it out. Go back over that with some other charcoal. I can take, this time let's take our harder eraser and get that highlight down there, and then I can kind of soften it a little bit with my finger. Yeah, your finger is totally okay to use to blend. You don't have to use a cloth, you don't have to always use a paper stomp. Paper stomp's kind of nice because you can get it down to a real nice point. So if you have some real subtle things to be doing with it, you can do it a little bit better than you can, especially with fingers like mine. I've got more like sausages than fingers. Okay, now that I've got my entire arsenal together here, I've done a real light sketch of one of my favorite models. This is the Clown Boy. So anyhow, we'll use him as kind of a basis. He's essentially a geometric creature. He's got kind of a sphere for a body. And he's got a little cone on top of his head, and he's got a disc around his neck, and this is kind of a potato shape. That's, kind of a squashed in circle. So I think that would be a good way to kind of start off. And each, I just very free-handed. I'm not being very exact. I'm just going to divide it into 4 parts, so then we can have part of them done in graphite, we'll have part of them done in color pencil, part of it in charcoal, and part of it in the soft pastels, and just, you know, they'll all have a slightly different look, so we'll see what happens. All right, I'm going to start off with a 2B. So I'm going to just get kind of a general notion of value scale. And this will be, you know, primarily just to kind of show the difference of the ability and limitations of each of the media. And then we might be able to use some combos, one on top of the other. I'll just see what happens. It's kind of an experiment. Okay, so I got things kind of lightly put in there. So I might have gotten just a little bit, let me look at my model here, a little bit of a highlight in some areas. So I'll kind of take care of that now. Kind of lighten a few of the areas up that I got a little too much value on. In the center of these things, some shadows. Okay. So now I can switch to, let's see, where is my 4B? Here's my 4B. Now I'm going to switch back to my 2B. I want to get just a little more value in here. And that's often what happens, that, you know, again, if you are developing things evenly and slowly, unless the image that you're working on is all about raw energy and power and brushstroke, you might want to be a little more patient and take a little more time and kind of adding things. Okay, now I will go to the softest one, the 6B. Now I can put in some really intense shadow areas. I'm going to bump up the contrast. Okay, so we got that quarter section done. For now, we'll see what happens as we progress. So now I'm going to take over with the color pencil. And a lot of what I'm doing is I'm now, instead of looking at the actual character, I may look at it for reference, but I don't stare at it. And I'm not necessarily trying to make an exact photographic replica of it, but I am looking at lighting cues and highlights and where the shadows are. But primarily, I kind of want to work on developing the character of my subject here. Okay, so I think the next thing should be the Soft Pastels. So I'm using this just for kind of like the general tonality of the whole thing. Then I've got this ring that goes around Clown Boy. So I think that would be nice if we actually did make that stand out a little bit. So I'm going to come back here with this kind of sanguine color. And there's kind of like a red bottom that you just barely see. That section, now we just have to finish up the charcoal. So here we have a little compendium of all that we've talked about here. This is the graphite, and these are the gold Faber colored pencils. These are the soft pastels, and this is the charcoal. So as you might suspect, I had great fun making this, and that's what this is all about. The potential for these premium materials. You can use them together, you can use them separately. Each one will have a different look, so you can decide for yourself what is the look that you're looking for in order to accomplish your own creative goals or discoveries or whatever. But you really should have fun with them. Really experiment, really put them through their paces. If you do a bad drawing, throw it away. Or flip it over. And eventually, if you keep at it and you keep thinking about what you're doing, then you should have tremendous fun and success. So good luck.